Yes, so it is now 9 o'clock and we will start this meeting. So good morning and a very warm welcome to this executive morning brief that we have called this time Compliance or Competitive Edge, learnings from the first wave of the CSRD reports. In this webinar, we will be discussing the key learnings from the first CSRD reports and unpack what these learnings mean for the ongoing omnibus discussion. Because these discussions are vital as past experiences and should shape future policy making, which is also why it's a great pleasure with us today that we have two of the absolute foremost thought leaders within the area of sustainability and reporting. So a very warm welcome to our two panelists today, Marjella Lecourt-Alma and Andreas Rasche, whom I will further introduce in a minute. But before we start, I just want to say that my name is Mette Amdi and I am a program manager here at CBS Executive Fonden, where we offer a large variety of both leadership and board programs. And also we run this series of morning briefs like these, where we kind of take temperature on relevant and very much in the air topics around sustainability. So to all of you, I think we have pretty much everyone on board now. A very warm welcome. And just before we start, a few practical details. I just want to start with saying we run for the next 45 minutes. And during the session, please feel free to ask questions as we go. In the bottom of your screen, you have the Q&A button, and you can just fill in a question there. Think about it as a relatively short written question. That makes it a bit easier for us to kind of catch up as we go. But then please don't hold back to the end of the session. Just write your questions there, and then Andreas and Marjella will pick up as we go. Also, the session will be recorded, so we will send it to you afterwards as well. In a second, we will ask you to find your phone because we'll do a little intro exercise. Normally, it's not a problem. It's normally within reach. So let's move on. And as a start, I would like to present our two specialists today. We have Marjella, who is the CEO and co-founder of Datamaran, which is a market-leading smart ESG software company, where Datamaran empowers companies to identify and prioritize ESG issues. And Marjella is also, I think I can say, a globally recognized thought leader. She is frequently featured in Financial Times, New York Times, The Economist, etc. And actually, at the age of 30, she became the youngest female director at the Global Reporting Initiative, where she established the service department. And she also serves as an advisory board member and ambassador for the Global Responsibility and Leadership Program at University of Groningen in the Netherlands. So a very warm welcome to you, Marjella.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the Netherlands today.
Thank you.
And
Glad
also, that's fantastic. Thank you. And also to you, Andreas Rasche, who is our professor here at CBS. Andreas is a professor of business and society at the CBS Center for Sustainability. Also, he's the associate dean for our CBS full-time MBA program. And on top of that, he is the academic dean for the CBS Executive Sustainable Leadership and Transformation Program. And dare I say, the most passionate person I have ever come across in this area of sustainability. So you should be in good hands for the next 45 minutes. But yeah, and a very warm welcome to you, Andreas.
Thank you, Mette. Pleasure to be here.
Lovely. Okay, but let's get right into it and let's start getting the participants active. So please, to all of you, pick up your phone and then on your screen now, with your camera, you scan the little code, and then you, in 1 or 2 words, please, and see if it's possible in 1 or 2 words, otherwise the word cloud will go crazy. Ask the question, so how do you feel about the first wave of the CSRD reports coming out here in 2025? Let's see what we get. I can see people start typing now. So in a minute, we will see your answers on the screen. Overwhelming, yes. A good beginning. Huge, yes. Responsible. Good words. Okay, Andreas, what do you make of it so far?
I love that overwhelming popped up, because that was kind of what I was expecting. I was hypothesizing on my way to work this morning. I was like, so what words might come up? And I thought like overwhelming was on my list. I think we see a lot of really good. I like curious as well, and maybe that's something, Marjella, that we can discuss later, because of course curiosity is something that is part of this reporting process.
And maybe also in terms of sustainability, right? As this industry or field is inevitably going through some challenges, I think the thing that's going to keep us going is our real passion and curiosity in the topic and wanting to drive it forward. So we have to remain curious.
We have to remain curious indeed. Also, information overload, overwhelming. I think that is something, of course, that was to be expected. And I think whenever something is new, right? I mean, you also get these type of reactions. But let's take this here as a basis. And I think there are also some comments here around disappointment, confusion, and proper messy data. And I think that's probably something also that should feature in our discussion later, because that's, of course, a feeling that I also often hear that people share. So really great. Thanks to all of you. I think it's fantastic. And I just also made a screenshot here and keep that in mind for our discussion. And it's always kind of great to see where you all stand on this. So Marjella, thank you for being here this morning. I think it's great to have you. And one of the reasons why I invited you, of course, is that first of all, you know a lot about reporting, and I think it is now the time to really take stock of what has happened so far on the CSRD front. And another reason is that you've done actually a lot of research in Datamaran on CSRD reports. And my first question would be to you, if you look at this research and if you look at, kind of the key messages, what are the key takeaways from the first wave of CSRD reports? Because I know that you've done a lot of good research on it. So from your perspective, where do you see the key takeaways?
Yeah. So if it's okay with you, I'll share my screen. I'll show you some slides that we prepared on our side. Let me start off by saying that I think for me, can everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So the main thing for me as an expert in this field, for the past 18 years, I've been working on sustainability reporting in some shape or form, now at Datamaran as a software company, but prior to that as an expert at a global reporting initiative. The most interesting promise of the CSRD was the fact that it was finally elevating this topic to C-suite with board responsibility. So I think although it was positioned as it's a reporting disclosure directive, it was also very much a governance directive with double materiality at the heart. And I think that to me was really the most exciting piece around the CSRD. And I think as we see companies, wave one companies are going through this implementation, I would hope that idea of this has now landed in the hands of C-suite will still hold and pass the test of time. And it should not be reduced to just a reporting and compliance exercise, the bigger topic of today, because it is so at the heart of how CSRD has been written up that this is very much thinking about sustainability disclosures is first most a strategic imperative that business leaders need to take seriously. But I'll take you through some of the findings of our research. Quickly, we did some pulse checking on LinkedIn prior, I would say, to the whole omnibus developments unfolding. And we asked people about what is the promise you see in CSRD. So in terms of the key parts of CSRD that people would have expected to be most valuable for their internal decision-making was really this notion of the IROs, right? The impacts, risks, and opportunities, companies actually being explicit around these issues pose a risk for our company, an opportunity for our company, or an impact. That was the piece, I would say, that people were most looking forward to. And a lot of companies did this for the first time. So I think this is also where maybe some of the frustration sits, like, this is not quite right how it was intended, or it doesn't cover all the pieces, but this was the promise. In terms of the main use cases, I think this was also interesting to see. So people said, obviously it has to guide our reporting approach, but more importantly, this recognition of it being a governance directive, it's about strategic planning and risk management. We have our CFO engaged. We have our general counsel engaged. We need to regularly now start to report this information to the board. I think some of the key challenges, so what did people find scary right off the bat? So the value chain piece, right? How do we make sure we get all the data in, figuring out all the timelines, and then especially when Omnibus started to pop up, what does this mean? Huge impact seen on governance. So we are seeing our boards and senior leadership increasingly being engaged. And then we also asked the question of, what are your expectations using CSRD for the next 3 years? So people would expect simplified reporting requirements. So maybe year 1 is difficult, but it gets easier and easier as everyone gets used to this way of standardized strategy setting, data collection and reporting. A better integration of sustainability and financial data. We saw the ESG controller pop up in lots of companies. And then obviously more harmonization across standards. At Datamaran, we started talking about CSRD as the kind of GDPR, right? Having GDPR effect. Like CSRD is the dominant framework in Europe, but there's going to be a Brussels effect. US companies will have to adopt this as well, and this is going to bring everyone up. So that was the pulse check. Then we did a research. I don't know if we want to pause now, Andreas, or if you want me to go into the research of the actual CRD reports that then came out.
Yeah, maybe briefly go into the reports, and then we can discuss some of this. And to everyone, of course, ask your questions along the way, as mentioned by Matt in the beginning.
Exactly. So we jumped right in when there were 304, to be specific, sustainability statements with a huge number, 11,000 plus IRO statements representing 21 countries across 57 industry, a massive standardization effort across the board. And I think one of the first findings was that when you look at the IROs, a lot of the reporting was quite impact focused. You know, me coming with my GRI hat on, I would say GRI inspired, right? Thinking about the impact we're having on the world, on business. And less familiarity, in a way, if you will, with talking about these issues as risk and opportunity, so needed for C-suite to go on board more broadly, also from the perspective of value creation. So I think we saw that quite firmly in the data. In terms of IROs, right, between 6 to 130 IROs, so that really being over the all over the map. Most companies between 25 to 45 IROs, but a wide variety in how double materiality was applied and the outcomes of that. Let's move on. So in terms of most reported topics, we saw a lot of topics being covered a lot. I would say probably the obvious ones, right? So this is not new. All these companies most of them have been reporting about climate change. So again, 99% did cover climate change. Would be interesting to look at the 1%. Who didn't? Own workforce, business contact. And there was also least reported topics. Some surprisingly, I think, water, biodiversity, not so much coming up in these reports. Is that being not familiar? I think it's worth digging in, right? This is decision useful information, I would say, especially for investors also caring about this. And also what was interesting is that there was a very small amount of companies that disclosed entity-specific IROs. And the entity-specific IROs that were disclosed, so those were topics outside of the scope of the ESRS frameworks, were around cyber, responsible AI, and digital transformation. So this whole technology agenda of companies. I think this is my last slide, and there's more in the report, but these are just some highlights. I think on average, companies said 6 out of the 10 ESRS standards were deemed material. And then that was a starting point from there then to determine what to disclose. And on average, so very similar to existing sustainability reports, an average of 100 pages or so. So I think proving that CSRD was not an additional burden in terms of actual, output of the thing, but very similar to previous sustainability reporting exercises, which also show trends like this. So I'll pause here, Andre.
Yeah, it's very interesting data that you have collected there, and I mean one of my questions that came up is. You mentioned there was very little on opportunity, right? How does this then fit actually with the original goal of the CSRD, to make this more decision relevant for senior managers? Because I mean, opportunities are often about future value creation, growth, so these kind of topics. But we don't seem to be there yet, right? I mean, which is of course normal. We need to keep in mind this is the first year of reporting, but we seem to overemphasize on the negative impacts and not so much on the opportunity. Why do you think is that?
Yeah, it's an inclusion topic for me. So I feel like, 18 years in this industry, we've come so far. We all agree. We have all these standards and frameworks, and CSRD is very similar to all those frameworks that came before. When I speak with people who are new to this, so let's think of the 2024 wave of new tech companies coming up around sustainability solutions, or the impact that the CSRD had in bringing in CFOs and CEOs that weren't previously engaged in these topics. I think on the one hand, we feel like this is quite an old industry when you talk to, the people that have been in it. From an inclusion standpoint, really reaching those other chambers, we have not made that much progress yet. This is an early conversation, and this is where I think it's not compliance or competitive edge, it's and. So with compliance as a stick coming into the business, it opened up really for the first time this opportunity to engage people strategically around these topics. And I think from that standpoint, it was just very much early days. And that's how I would look at the data, like the impact data. It's kind of reporting as companies did it before, with that risk and opportunity element. Now also pushed very much from the ISSB standpoint, right? Let's talk about financial materiality. Bringing in these other stakeholders in the company that now had to. And these are, not long-term engagements or long-standing engagement. This is all relatively new from their standpoints.
I mean, you mentioned also that there was, and of course this is also that other research in this area has shown, there was not a lot of reporting on biodiversity, water. How do you make sense of that, or how should kind of someone who looks at that data make sense of that? Because biodiversity as such, of course, is a highly relevant topic. Is it simply, that companies are not mature enough yet? Are the disclosures not mature enough yet? Do we not have the data, or what is going on?
It's a combination of things. So I think on the one hand, it's maturity. And I think maybe when you, again, right, if this gets done from the top down, there's a high level of familiarity with the topic of climate change. I would say we kind of fundamentally agree that topic is material. We don't need to do a materiality assessment on it. When it comes to biodiversity, it is newer. Also, the way in which you measure that is newer. And I think a big part of the CSRD dilemma or trouble in paradise was around what the auditors would be asking you for and what they would be checking on. And I think there's some of these areas that are newer where I would expect companies to be way less comfortable in having very elaborate data sets ready to be checked and rather say we keep that a little bit more concise, or we'd rather not touch that yet. We'll get our stuff internally in order first, in order we actually go there. Let's present the stuff we are ready to get audited on. There was a real, I would say 50% of the CSRD conversation was around audit or assurance, I should say. That's the right terminology there.
Yeah, and this is also some of the messages I try to send to policymakers that, I mean, this was the first year of reporting, right? I mean, we are in a learning process, and some of the critique that was raised also by policymakers and also by business associations, I must say, was I don't think very legitimate, because whenever you launch a new regulation, best practices, routines need to be defined. We know this from many prior studies on other regulatory efforts. These things you are not born perfectly. So you simply need some time and you need some openness to learn. We have a question here on, did you find any differences between industries and company size or market scope? Is there anything that did you consider that in the research?
In terms, I would invite everyone to go to our website and get the research. I think the biggest differences in terms of disclosures were more in terms of topic materiality, so certain topics being obviously more material, but not big differences in the way in which the framework for now was applied. But I agree with you, Andreas. I don't think CSRD really had the chance to start walking, right? It's a baby that's becoming a toddler, and we have to see how it works, see how it goes. This was also very much the way in which TCFD was brought to market. I remember companies saying, but it's not clear enough how we need to do scenario planning and how we need to do all these things. And the leaders at the time said, we're going to bring it to the business so you can help us figure out how this is done in practice, because this is quite complex stuff. Same goes for CSRD also. Let's see how it's being taken, and then from there, let's build out that policy.
Yeah, and I remember when the TCFD was launched, Mark Carney, who's now Prime Minister of Canada, he also said, I mean, we all need to learn a great deal here, right? So it's let's be patient and let's not patient in the sense to delay things, but patient in the sense to be open to learning. Marjella, I mean, which insights from very interesting what you presented here, which insights do you think are relevant for the omnibus discussion, which is going on right now? And of course, it's grabbing so much attention, rightly so, because the proposals are quite substantial that are on the table. So what would you make out of your research for the omnibus?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think what we're seeing is a lot of companies will just kind of continue with the CSRD as they had planned. And we'll see that with wave one, but we'll see that with wave two companies who will get started, especially those that have adopted sustainability reporting for a long time. I think companies start on the basis of what they know. I think the biggest change now with the whole omnibus developments delaying things quite significantly is that the overall standing and status of the CSRD has really decreased. This fear of what's going to happen with the audit, what penalties will I get, I think is kind of out of the window.
Yeah.
So as we talk to our clients and larger network, it's about continuing with the spirit of the CSRD without panic, really. The flip side of it is that a lot of companies who don't need to do it anymore might not start for a long time, and I think that's bad news for us as an industry and the world at large to not have that kind of data.
Yeah. I fully agree with you, and I think this is because we talked so much about learning so far. I mean, this is why it's so important to not put the scope up to 3,000 employees, because then you basically have the companies who already reported in any case, just continuing what you do, but you have no learning, effects. And so I think it is important for the scope discussion. And I think it's very interesting what you showed in the beginning, that even early 2025, people kind of said, we need a certain degree of simplification. So simplification as such is not a problem, right? I mean, to kind of simplify the frameworks, make them more efficient, align methods. But what is, of course, needed is we need to keep the ambition level high. And I think this is probably where the omnibus runs into problems. There's a question from Julia here about the data that you presented. Is there a review that explains the relationship between the themes that represented and the themes that banks are evaluating most? So could it be, you know, that banks might be one of the pressure points here in terms of choosing material topics?
I cannot really answer that question in detail now, but I'm happy to share the detailed results on that.
Okay, great. In terms of there are also some questions here around shifting the narrative from compliance and risk mitigation towards value creation. And your data kind of also showed that, of course, in a sense, there is an appetite for that, right? And whenever we move this into the boardrooms, whenever we move this towards C-suite, we essentially talk value creation and not just risk. How do we make this shift? What would you recommend, you know, that shifting from compliance towards more value creation discussions?
Yeah, I think you know, people in the profession have been doing that. I see a lot of discussions around LinkedIn saying, oh, you know, what did we do wrong? We should have said this instead of this. And like we were all making the case for, you know, sustainability and ROI, if you will, or value creation. I think on the one hand, we do need that stick. So once the omnibus process is finished, finally, right? Plus in combination with the ISSB continue to drive reporting in UK and US and other areas, I think we'll build back up from there, as in the compliance stick will be back at the right level in the company and will help us get that conversation going again, that starting conversation around risk and opportunity. At the same time, I think our realities are also starting to catch up with us. So what I mean with that is, you know, I think from the 2007, that's when I got started in this field, we were always positioning sustainability as something about long-term value. And, you know, just look at what's going on around us in the world. I don't need to mention it because everyone knows. I think this is no longer about long-term value creation. It's about short-term value retention. And pointing that out, but also I think it will be obviously seen, will move leaders of companies in a direction that they will want to tackle this right on. And that conversation will not be about CSRD compliance per se, but it will be about the topics that are in the CSRD. And then it's about pinpointing the connections there and the value that standards have to actually get this data, measure this data effectively, and do something about it. So I think you know, I'm hopeful that the reality the world is in will help business leaders catch up on, you know, actioning this and seeing the value and risk piece of it more clearly.
Yeah. Thank you. And keep on asking these great questions. We have a lot of questions here, so thank you for that. And I'm working on getting them all to you, Marjella. There was this question here by Nina exactly around this compliance. So she basically asks, you know, compliance versus risk management. For her, it is risk management plus opportunities. Of course, for her boss, it's more a focus on compliance. So where should she start? And I would say start really also with, and I think you said it nicely, there is also the case for short-term value retention, right? You have a lot of also short-term issues that are affected by sustainability. This is not all abstract 2040, 2050. We have changing commodity prices. We have changing insurance prices. We have customers asking in value chains for this information. We have government tenders. So try to make this short-term business case, I would say. To
and perhaps, you know, Andreas, if I may maybe choose your battles. I think the sustainability profession is facing some serious, you know, pushback right now. And I think internally you have to go with the coalition of the willing. And then you need to figure out what's the language they use, right? And speak that kind of language. We built out Datamaran in 2014 with this idea of, you know, if we can make sustainability more objective, we're going to bring in people that are now not part of this agenda. And I think it's pretty much back to that, you know, seeing internally who do you still have, right? Who's still with you? And what are the particular agenda points they're keen to drive forward and find some alliances there. And then I would expect things on the reporting side, it will swing back. Now, maybe everyone's fatigued and kind of taking a break from talking about CSRD, especially at that C-suite level. But at some point, as things get back to normal, there will be a CSRD baseline, there will be an ISSB baseline, and we can build back on top.
And can I just get, because you just mentioned it now and it also pops up here in the questions, can I just get your thinking on CSRD and ISSB? Because it also became a topic in the entire Omnibus discussion. How much alignment do we want? How much alignment do we need? Some people say, why don't we just align completely with ISSB? And why does Europe need its own kind of, do its own kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there's probably already, if you look closely at the standards, there's a high level of, that's the new word, right? Interoperability between the two. I think the biggest difference in the two frameworks were really around double materiality and single materiality, financial materiality. You could theoretically argue that single financial materiality is better equipped to bring the C-suite leaders in, if you will, but at the same time, the mandatory momentum that the CSRD had was also very, very good at doing that. I think looking at materiality as a concept, whether it's single financial or whether it's double materiality, they have more in common than not. It's actually not so different.
Yeah.
I look at single and double more as a time horizon issue, right? So those that are financially material now, it's very easy to make the business case for that today, and I think that's what we need to do. So I would hone on that financial materiality, because that is kind of consistent with that thinking about what are those issues that help us with short-term value retention. At the same time, you want to be looking ahead as a business, right? And that goes more into thinking medium to long term. And I think this is where more that impact materiality sits, because that is not non-financial, that is maybe future financial. And being able to, say, actually, CSRD and ISSB ultimately have very similar goals, and at getting information that's currently not readily available in the market in a standardized way out there. And I think sometimes discussions around, how are they really different are holding us back, but also preventing us from bringing people in who are maybe trying to understand.
There is an interesting question here, Marjella, around the expertise within companies on environmental issues. And since we discussed biodiversity, water, being least reported in your research, could that be also maybe an explanation for it, that we also need to upskill within companies? And may I just say, out of my own research, also very much on the board side, and this is, I think, where a lot needs to be done in terms of expertise. But I think the question here is more within the sustainability teams as well. I mean, is there a need?
Yes. But I would have, this was a major topic that we pushed across 2023, 2024. We talked about the ESG skills gap. And it's a skills gap that existed within companies, but also we saw it in terms of all these new software companies that were popping up and they were saying, oh, we're using technology to help you solve a skills gap. We did the same. We were there as well. And then also on the consultant side, right? Big Four doing massive amount of training internally to get everyone skilled up on ESG. I think that kind of scale is probably no longer happening, or let's even call it appropriate. We've seen sustainability teams in-house being decreased, budgets being cut, sustainability software companies disappearing that were too CSRD focused and have no business anymore. So I think it's about having the right skills, but it's having the right skills in a very focused way. And being able to, again, it's almost like we have to be a little bit smaller. We have to be a little bit more undercover. We have to really make sure that we know internally, I'm talking about corporations here, who are the people who still want to drive this forward and pick 1, 2, 3 battles, not do the whole 9 yards. And that is I would say probably the biggest difference from 2024 to 2025 in terms of people having jobs in this space.
Yeah. Indeed, and I think you rightly point towards the entire job issue. I mean, something, whenever we discuss the omnibus proposal, something that goes completely unnoticed is that this, of course, also did something to the entire industry, right? And I think policymakers sometimes they don't have this on their agenda. I mean, they think, I think, too much in one way. There is a good question here by Thomas, because both of us, we talked a little bit about long-term value creation ceding to short-term value retention. Could you maybe expand a little bit on that, asked Thomas, in terms of how long-term value creation cedes towards short-term value retention in this current environment where you, of course, have lots of pressures on companies, lots of short-term pressures. And I would probably also argue, I mean, some of the sustainability discussions are simply overshadowed also by other topics like geopolitics, AI, at least when I talk to people in this area.
Yeah, no, I think we are in a market that is very much characterized by great uncertainty. And what we see happening, in our client base, but I think large listed companies across the board, is cautiousness, cost cutting. AI is a big topic. Everyone talks about it, not sure what to do, but we're not investing it. 6 months later, they are investing it. So I think this is where my world is now, as a CEO of Datamaran, also seeing more and more companies looking at sustainability software as a line item. And last year it was about, okay, let's get all the resources we need. So we'll get a reporting platform, we get a data collection platform, we get Datamaran for ESG governance and materiality. We'll get a team of consultants in to help us with all this stuff. And almost without thinking very clearly about what was actually needed and required. It was a state of panic. We need to get everything in, and then we'll figure it out. What's happening now is, we're getting a break, right? We're getting a break from CSRD. There's a clear pause there, and this actually puts us in a position to also look at sustainability expenditures or sustainability programs or whatever it's called within corporations, to also redline some stuff there and simply take it out of budget. And I think that's part of the general tendency that we're seeing in business, but it is also very much affecting the sustainability departments, even more so with the signal that Europe has been sending with deprioritizing sustainability. I think that's how it's being seen, that's how it's being perceived.
Yeah, exactly. And there is lots of signals coming this way, and I'm fully with you. I always think about short-term and long-term value creation, I think, in the context of these value drivers, right? I mean, what you need to ask yourself, what is moderating between company value and sustainability? And I think there are certain value drivers in a company, and you can also kind of categorize them into, for instance, growth-related drivers, risk-related drivers. And what we see on the risk side is actually quite interesting, that a lot of the calculations that were out there 2-3 years ago, where some of these things were distant future risks, they have become actually more real. I mean, they have become more real in the sense that, yes, you have supply chain disruptions, you have litigation risks, you have regulatory risk, you have operational risks. So these kind of things have become more real, more short term, also because of course, some of the physical realities that are simply changing around us. And I think with everything that we are discussing here, we shouldn't forget that of course, these realities are changing. We have a lot of questions. Thank you all for sending them. Keep on doing. It's and I'm trying to pick the ones. Of course, I'm pretty sure we don't get through all of them, but I'm trying to do my best here to still pick some. There is a question around IROs and IRO evaluation, Marjella. And the person here writes, yeah, I mean, the IRO evaluation process, according to the person, was almost pointless, quotation marks, because it was generally structured to meet stakeholder expectations, since the scientific base was not so clear. Now we are talking about a revision of the ESRS. So what can we do better? with regard to kind of the IRO evaluation process. Any thoughts on that?
That's a big one.
It's a big one indeed.
You know, I've seen these crazy, completely, I think, out of hand IRO projects, right? From companies that wanted to do it really, really, really well. Thousands of IROs needing to be evaluated and be analyzed. And then on the one hand, we're saying sustainability is strategic, right? Do a couple of things really, really well. So I think if I'm looking at those projects last year, there was a lot of figuring out how to do the doing around the CSRD without thinking about how we're going to make this impactful, how we're going to make this stick, who's actually then going to action something. So I think there's a lot to be, back to that learning point, right? There's a lot to be learned about how to do the CSRD effectively. And I think ultimately what we would want to see, right, as stakeholders in this world, is that a company has a clear compass for where they can make some change that will make them successful so they can continue to make that change and the world around them. And there cannot be, thousands of IROs. That's just being all over the place. So, yeah, how to do that exactly? We're working on it. We're trying to simplify that as well. But it's a massive newness challenge. And yeah.
And maybe also some better guidance. I always felt that we lacked good guidance also on the auditing side for CSRD, and this is something that the policymakers I think didn't get right. I think more authoritative guidance.
Yeah, I agree. So I think a lot of those guidance documents, right, that were issued by EFRAG were seen as somehow kind of being very prescriptive, whereas they were just there to help. And I think oftentimes what we saw is that the auditors also started to interpret that not as guidance, but as this is how it should be done to the letter.
Yes.
And I think that's where we went into really like a bad rabbit hole. I think that maybe was part of the reason why the omnibus development started to happen, because there was such large pushback to this perceived administrative burden that the CSRD would bring. But actually, if you read it well, I think the first version, the double materiality instrument gave you a lot of ways to make it specific to you, and was already a simplification tool in itself, but was badly understood.
Exactly. And I think we have also a couple of questions here on the omnibus. Does it still serve its original purpose? And I would say, I mean, the problem from my side is that the original purpose of the omnibus was never clearly defined. So that and that is kind of also explaining a little bit the mess that we are in now. I think we need to define the problem pretty precisely, but this is difficult. We discussed it in the beginning, Marjella, in a situation where a regulation is only out, not even a year, and you already start simplifying it. So you can, by definition, actually not collect any meaningful data and start to define the problems really in a good way in order to then have pointed improvements.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Also, I remember, when I was at GRI, at some point I realized that there's a very clear discrepancy because what you had theoretically intended versus what actually the businesses end up doing.
Exactly.
And I think it's going to be the same with, let's call it the omnibus reporters, right? Maybe what we're going to see will be interesting in terms of our research, will be very similar to wave one, the first 300 plus statements that came out. We are always kind of fine-tuning and over-engineering and wanting things to be different, while in practice companies do it in a way they think makes most sense for them. But I think it was mostly for those that were really new to this, getting also, understanding what this would cost to them, right? Like there were budgets were 1 million plus on this stuff. Thinking, is this really needed? No, maybe not. Maybe it's not.
Exactly. I'm fully with you on this. Thank you so much, Marjella, for this morning's conversation here. I really appreciate you being on our CBS Executive Morning Brief. It was great to hear your thoughts, to see your research. Very much appreciated. Thanks to all of you from the audience for your great questions. We didn't quite get through. Please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I think that of course is always, and we are happy to discuss these things with you. And with this, I hand it back to Mette.
Thank you very much. And from my chair here, I would like to thank both of you for participating with us today and sharing your thoughts and your insights and your knowledge around this very, very important topic. And I think I just want to round up saying to all of you out there, keep up the good work. We believe in you.